Astrial are God's shards who have descended into this world. Scripture says they're sent to fight evil. They protect this world from fallen humans who have contracted with evil and is trying to steal human emotions and wreak havoc. Even amidst the chaos lurks legend, an enchanting tale told to our children. The story takes us to a small room where Mom asks Claire why Eziel is crying. Claire answers and says she told Eziel she was stupid. She tries to write another letter to the May Fairy to ask her for another gift. She tells her mom that the May Fairy doesn't exist, and it's her mom who gives them all presents. She told it to Eziel, but she started calling Claire a liar. Claire says she even showed her the letters from her mother's dresser, but she still didn't believe it and was crying. Eziel walks up to her mom, takes her by her dress, and asks, "Doesn't the May Fairy exist?" Eziel and Claire are two opposites. Mom doesn't understand how her twins can be so different. Whenever she gets in over her head, she doesn't know what to do. In such cases, she tries to calm down her little daughter. Claire apologizes to Eziel and says her mom's not the May Fairy. She won't say that again. Eziel, still with tears in her eyes, but with a happy smile, also apologizes and says that we should make peace. She takes Claire's hand. Eziel has the most charming smile. The girls tell Mommy that they are going to play outside and not to worry. Mommy asks them not to stay out late. The girls say they won't go far away. They are walking in a beautiful field that is near their village. Eziel picks a lot of flowers and asks Claire what she thinks a wreath of these flowers would be good for Mom. Claire says the wreath will be very, very beautiful and asks that Eziel make a wreath for her too. While her sister is busy with the flowers, Claire is very bored. She is not interested. She is thinking at this moment about the children's reason for believing in the May Fairy. She doesn't understand. Why do kids always believe that the good fairy exists? Do they turn a blind eye to the truth for the sake of some free gifts? She realizes that even though she immediately realized that the May Fairies don't exist when she heard about her, she is like a white crow, unlike her twin sister Eziel or the other children. Many children would be sad without their father, but few would suspect that periodic moves could mean their family was on the run. Their mom always said that when the kids grew up, they would understand the reason for not living in one place. At this point, Claire is demonstrating magical skills normal kids can't do that. Apparently, it has something to do with the fact that they were constantly moving from place to place. Claire tickles Eziel's hair with the wind, which makes her smile and laugh. And she asks her sister to stop. Her flowers have flown away, and she asks Claire to collect the flowers that have flown away. Claire creates an air vortex and gathers them all in one place. They move again, so Claire thinks she can enjoy some peace and quiet while her sister plays in the garden. Claire is tired of hiding in small villages. She's tired of it all. It's weird and exhausting. Can she meet someone like her if they move to the city? Can there be someone there who can explain why she's like this? The girl swirls her power in a magical vortex around her finger, but at one point when Eziel wanted to show off her wreath, she notices people standing around her sister who walled around her sister. The girl is afraid of these people. One of them is a white-haired man with pink eyes. He looks at Claire disparagingly. She can't leave things alone and use her power. Her magic bursts from her hands, but the wind suddenly disappears. She looks up and sees a handsome young man standing beside her. She looks and realizes that his eyes are very similar to her eyes, which are similar shades, exactly the same facial features, something reminiscent of herself. His pristine, pale skin was like untouched snow. This was the Duke of Siula, a man dubbed a hero in their history. She studied him from every angle, and they are exactly the same. The only difference is that she is a little girl and he is a grown man. Of course, physically they are different, but still, even so, the resemblance is visible to the naked eye. Claire hides her sister behind her back and threatens her attackers not to come any closer. Duke Arshel says that he knows their names and that they are twin girls. They say he is right, but why the question? He smiles sweetly while standing on one knee to match the height of the girls. Eziel sees the Duke's smile and is struck by his beauty. She says her name is Eziel. The Duke also introduces himself, and the Duke's name is Arshel. Claire somehow remembered that in their long tradition of the Empire, a father gives his name to a daughter who doesn't look like him. while a daughter who is an exact copy of her father is named after her mother, and the name Eziel is one of the variations of the name Arshel. While the girls were trying to figure out what was going on, they were approached by an excited mom who looked surprised at the handsome gentleman who called her by the name of Charlotte. She says they did meet. She didn't think they would meet again. The man says he didn't know Charlotte had 2 daughters. Mom says her daughters will be better off without the Duke. She turns around and says it would be nice if she never saw his face again. He says it won't be so good from now on. Mom asks the reason why the Honorable Duke of Seoul came all this way. To inconvenience her while her parents argued, Claire couldn't imagine it in her head. How did they ever have kids while the mom meets her man and asks him to get out? He says divorce is out of the question. Her Highness escaped execution. Claire didn't expect her mom to be called Highness. She asks what execution the Duke is talking about. What could Mom have done wrong? Claire doesn't understand why the Earl is so upset. At this time, her mother is comforting Eziel, who was frightened when she heard about the execution, and hugs her mother. Is he so upset because his pregnant wife left him and because she started fighting with him from the moment they met? Or is he upset because he didn't start looking for them sooner? Claire doesn't have all the answers, but she can tell you he's very upset. Mom says if being the Duchess of Sioux City is the only way to stay alive, then let him leave and tell them she's dead. She asks him to tell them that a spoiled royal princess can never get out of the palace and everyone will believe him. Meanwhile, the mother will continue to look after the children and remain inconspicuous to live quietly. He lived well, not knowing that she has children. She asks him if he can continue on. It turns out that the Duke of Arshel is a close friend of the Emperor and the Austeriol of the court. It's sort of like a justice of the peace or a judge deciding the death penalty. After he married the daughter of a former emperor, he was instrumental in overthrowing his father-in-law. And this making her mom the daughter of a former emperor, she had heard about the story, and they didn't make her feel good. Now the girls go to the carriage. Eziel is very much excited. She has not seen such a graceful and lovely carriage. She asks her mother, will they really be riding in it? Claire realizes that they have no other choice but to go with the Duke. In vain, she complained about the boring life. Apparently, this is her punishment. Events unfolded very quickly. Eziel asks her sister to hurry up and get into the carriage. She takes her hand and smiles like a little sunshine. Claire asks, does she really know where they are going? Because she is very worried. Claire's very mature for her age. Mama's watching, but she's approached by the Duke, who takes her hand. Mama wonders who her daughter's taken after. Claire remembers that her mom has a habit that when she gets nervous, she starts rubbing her temple whenever she puts her thumb above her ear. It means they are moving soon now. This man took his hand away from her face as if he knew her habits. Claire realized why she chose him. Meanwhile, the servant asks the girls to get into the carriage. They go inside and assess the situation. Claire somehow does not care, while Eziel is very happy. But unfortunately, to get into the carriage immediately could not, because there are very high steps. The Duke approaches the daughters and offers the young ladies his help. The girls have never heard anyone call them lady. They look at each other and don't understand what's going on. Although they are different, they are also very similar. The Duke lifted the girls into the carriage and saw that Claire was a little dirty, so he shook off her dress, at which point the girl noticed the wedding ring on his hand. At this point, she thinks that all this time when the Duke married her mom, he kept wearing the ring. She asks herself how long he's been looking for his wife, thinking every time he looks at that ring, he's the only person who has a peaceful relationship with her mom. She hopes Mom has noticed he's still wearing the ring. Mom asks the Duke where he's taking them. He says he's found a place not far from here and is interrupted by Eziel, who asks the Duke to wait, and gives him a pretty flower. He asks why the girl gives him this pretty flower, and the girl says that she decided to give it to him for letting them in his carriage. Duke is a little confused by the little girl's insistence. She says that it is the wild rose, her favorite flower in the world, which blooms only in May and means longing for her family. The Duke accepts the gift and smiles very sweetly, holding the flower in his hand. You can see on his face that he is happy about this symbolic gift. Mama asks Eziel to sit still without any small talk. The Duke gets out of the carriage and closes the door behind him. At that moment, he enjoys the scent of the flower that Claire notices. He looks like not a bad man. Why does Mama think they would be better off if they didn't know about him? The girl notices that the seats in the carriage are really very comfortable. She notices that her mother sits as if in her own seat, while her mother asks Eziel to sit up straight so that she won't be hurt. Claire realizes that this is not the first time she has ridden in one of these carriages. Her mother looks at Claire with a sad face and sees that she wants to ask her daughter something, so she doesn't hesitate and tells her to ask. But Claire doesn't want to ask anything. That doesn't mean she doesn't have questions. She can easily ask them and she can find the answer, but she's not sure if Mom will tell the truth or not. They arrive at their destination very late at night. The Duke opens the carriage and says that Her Highness can go out. She asks for help to get out of the carriage. The girls are all sleepy and the Duke helps them down. He's like a plush toy. He lets the little girls down at this point. Claire thinks he's obviously inexperienced with children. He's very awkward. But suddenly she sees in front of her something incredible. Is a palace of incredible size to which go bright lanterns that illuminate everything around, and the butler and servants lined up to greet the Lord. Claire sees her mother walking among all these servants. Claire sees that she used to be part of this world. She first sees her for who she really is. The Duke carries Claire in his arms to the palace. He asks Her Highness if she likes it here, but she says only a fool wouldn't like it. The only problem is the Duke himself. He sighs and says it's an old estate, but he's happy to please Her Majesty's taste. The doors of the old palace open before them. The woman does not like that the Duke calls her with a title because she has long since forfeited her right to the throne. But he says she's still the granddaughter of Rasul III, the current emperor's nephew, so she's still a member of the royal family. She will never be disqualified from the throne they go in, and Charlotte asks to talk about it when they put the girls to bed. When they have already gone in, the Duke shocks her mother that he asked to have his name taken off the list of founders to apologize to her. She turns to the Duke and asks if he's crazy. She didn't ask him to do it, but the Duke says it's his own decision. As they stand at the entrance to the castle, Mom sees that Claire is still awake. Claire tells Mom to promise her not to say anything. Claire always wondered why she was different from the other children, especially from Eziel, even though they are twins. The girl demonstrates her magic while in the Duke's arms. She raises the wind using magical powers. She never told her mother about it. She said she was a strange child from the beginning. She didn't want her mother to suffer more because of her. Her mother is always self-confident, even a little selfish, but she always burdens herself with pain and worries as if she's being held by thorny roots. Claire is sure that she was the biggest burden for her when Eziel was just learning to talk. She could already hold a conversation and string a sentence together. She could spend days reading just one book. And when she got a little older, she didn't feel like a kid, let alone a human being. She's sure she broke her mom's heart. The difficulties my mom faced as a single mom moving all the time. They were probably nothing compared to raising a child without emotion. Their nanny said it bothers her that the child has no emotions at all. She says the mother knows about a temple that always has a place for people like her. Maybe it's better to send her to that temple. Her mother kicks the woman out of the house. Claire sees what happened and asks her mother why she is angry with the nanny. She cries every day because of her. But then suddenly Eziel comes over and takes Claire's hand. She says they're like night and day. They should share each other's worries. In that moment, the family unites and embraces together their love. Bit by bit changed the emotionless Claire. Thanks to them, she was able to learn empathy and social skills and emotions. She doesn't want Mom to be sad ever again. She's already shed a lot of tears for her. She tells Mom she doesn't like it when she's sad or worried. But now she's sure her mom has something to say that she'll regret. Claire wants to ask her mom about something she's been thinking about for a while. So her mom asks her to wait until she's put Eziel to bed, and then they can talk. When Her Highness left, Claire was alone with the Duke. She'd forgotten all about him, very awkwardly. In Claire's books, I read that it appears that in this world there is Austrial, the judge of heaven and the laws of justice. The rules set by their God will be implemented on earth as well as in heaven, is quoting scripture. The Austrioles are demigods who are called to save mankind. They are god particles who have entered their world. Each of the three is born with a unique power. They are still in our world, even after the peace and tranquility of the earth. They are a reflection of the gods' love for mankind, but all the living Austrioles that people see now are different from those described in the scriptures. The family is at the table, and Mom asks Claire if she's going to eat, but Claire says she can eat tomorrow with Eziel. Mom tells Claire she's sure she's fine. Yeah, she and Eziel are different, but that's totally normal. They're just born different. Eziel's just a normal kid. Claire at this moment thinks her mom looks a lot like Eziel. She hasn't seen her in a long time. She has this look on her face. Claire openly asks her mom if she's Austriol. Claire looks just like Eziel and her mom, but she looks just like her dad, who is Austriol. Her powers are different from normal magic or divine powers. Dad says he bets that Claire has always had trouble connecting emotionally with people. He also says that the most important thing is her abilities. She is different from the others. The Austrioles are a little different from how they are described in the scriptures. This fact she should keep in her mind. Claire sees that when her dad tells her the truth, her mom's not very happy. Apparently, something's about to happen. Dad goes on and says the Austrioles are going through something complicated that isn't written in the scriptures, but Claire has no idea what Dad's talking about. Arshel asks if Charlotte didn't tell Claire about Tara knowing she could be Austriol. Mom is very sad. She says that Tara is something the girl read about in the scriptures. There was a devil who seduced all the Austrioles and led them directly to death. They were the first of their kind to humanize an Austriol. It's the name of their first demigod. The scripture says the Tars were created to seduce the Austrioles. When the Tars successfully seduced all the Austrioles were stripped of all their powers and were encased in an immortal body. They never set foot in heaven again, Claire asks. And what Mom might think of that, but she blushes and reacts very strangely. The girl asks her father why her mom is reacting the way she is. Her father tells Charlotte to tell her that she is Tara. Claire, seeing her mother's reaction, apparently realizes that Mommy's not ready to talk about it yet. But she sees her father's face, who reacts very nicely to her mother's behavior. He blushes a little, which makes his smile more adorable. He sees that his daughter is looking at him, and so he turns his attention to her. Smiling and pleased with her now, Claire realizes what the Tars are doing to the Austrioles. Austrioles are unusual and unsociable. They have no feelings for other people, but the Tars awaken emotions in them, shaking their very essence. Austrioles can also feel love for a daughter they've never seen before. That's what the Tars do to the Austrioles. If love affects Austriol so much, why for him to meet Tara is a calamity. It is a rushing storm, shattering flawless perfection. Such perhaps it may come from the lovely Claire. Father says that in the description of the Tars, they're not very fond of them. After all, the Tars are mortals that the Austrioles can fall in love with. Father says that Claire shouldn't worry. She has a chance to meet her Tara. For every Austriol, there's a Tara for every Austriol. She'll have a wide range of choices during her life, but she'll know it's hers. When she meets him, she knows she's looking into the eyes that hold her whole world, with her father looking on in love. Mom says it doesn't matter if the girl finds her Taru or not. She's smart, and she'll figure it out on her own. She knows not to worry. Mommy was pregnant when she ran away from the Duke. Let's say Claire meets her Tara. She's head over heels in love, and he's not. She favors a guy she doesn't really know. And what if the love isn't mutual, and she can't bear the pain of his disgust? Claire doesn't understand how they can talk about it so easily. But her father says that it's better to tolerate Tara's hatred just to have her around, because it's impossible to live without her. Of course, he will be in a slight obsession, but Claire thinks that this wording is not appropriate, because her father clearly shows a great dependence on her mother. Mom says Dad's crazy. How can he say that to a kid and let him watch his mouth? But my father counters and says she's right. Well, then let her be an example of what she teaches. Mom tries to calm Claire and say that she has a very, very beautiful, and her Tara will love her with boundless love, not to find a person who cannot like her. At this point, my dad gets into their conversation and says that my mom may not believe it, but there are always people like that. At these words, Mom's temper tantrums begin. Claire seems to understand why Mom ran away. She takes her little girl in her arms and demands her father apologize. The Duke stands up and apologizes, then takes them to his chambers and wishes them a good night. But then Charlotte walks up to the man and takes him by the neck. She will say it only once and let him listen to her carefully. She used to think she hated him and didn't like him at all, like everyone around him. She hated everyone at the temple, too. But what annoyed her most was how often he came to see her, even though it always ended in a fight. But after she ran away and took care of the kids, she had time to think. The thing is, she didn't hate him at all, but it's the one who's always rushing to her aid and looking out for her safety. At this point, her father says he doesn't understand her. She says no one believed she was a Tara except him. She is just a mortal woman who constantly bickers with him, and in front of her he is the mighty Austrial. She hated those who laughed at her, but she couldn't admit she was a Tara, so she acted like that. But the Duke didn't give up. He refused to admit defeat, and after all the scandals she made, he came to her. Maybe that's why she could believe that she was his Tara. She apologizes to the Duke for not apologizing when they first met and tells him she's his Tara Austriola. She apologizes for denying it for so long. She was afraid he'd leave her, so she left him. She promised herself she'd tell him that if they ever met again. She doesn't hate him. She loves him. Charlotte takes Claire and leaves. Claire sees her mom's face and realizes she's kind of calmed down. And meanwhile, as the father remained behind in prostration as if believers who had received a revelation from their God. Meanwhile, little Eziel wakes up in the morning and is surprised to find a soft bed and a nice nightie on. She looks where she is and sees that there is a beautiful palace around. She asks Claire, who is lying next to her and sleeping, what was that white man who came to them? Was it really an angel February? Meanwhile, Claire looks perplexed at Eziel, who woke her up. She doesn't understand what nonsense she can talk about. Eziel says she thought the Duke looked a lot like Claire, and she thought it was the May Fairy who granted her wish and brought Daddy back to them. Claire recalls that there was a time when Eziel really asked the May Fairy to bring Daddy home, but she thought it was the May Fairy. Does she really think he was sent by the May Fairy? Eziel asks. Claire, could their daddy be an angel? Eziel says he became an angel and lost his memory, and then remembered them and decided to take them to heaven with him. At that moment, the girl had focused eyes that expressed the emotion of pure and rebellious self-confidence. This is a very complicated theory, and it is illogical. Claire asks Eziel not to scream because her mother might wake up. A servant comes into the room, and the maids ask the little girls, calling them ladies, to get up and help them get ready. Now Claire realizes that she has no chance of convincing little Eziel that they are not in heaven. They go and walk around the palace estate. Claire asks Eziel if she knows she can only go to heaven after death. Does she really think they are all dead? Her opinion is they are all still alive. Eziel looks at herself and wonders if she's really alive and says that they probably didn't go to heaven after all. Claire tries to explain that if she's alive, then they're not in heaven. Eziel finally catches some thought and apologizes. Apparently, this is a truly ordinary world. Claire finally sighs lightly and says that one less misconception left to convince her that the Duke is not an angel at all, but their father. Eziel sees her father nearby. She takes Claire's hand and pulls her with her. She wishes the Duke good morning. Claire is glad she didn't call him an angel, which is a good sign. They notice that next to him are some other man. He greets Lady Claire and Eziel and wishes them good morning. He appears to be the Duke's butler and is very happy to help them out. They can always rely on him and call on him if they have any questions, and he has served the Duke since his early youth. Eziel takes his father by the sleeve and asks him if he is a Duke. Apparently, the way the butler introduced himself to them suggested that their father was not an angel, but a Duke. The father kneels down and approaches the little girls. He puts on Eziel's hair and the sleeve of Claire's dress, a beautiful piece of jewelry. Eziel turns to Claire and says that she looks a lot like the Duke. She remembers that before her mother dyed her hair, it was kind of the same color as the Duke's. Claire tells how her mother made her a hair potion, but her eye color is already very noticeable, and her silver hair attracts even more attention. To which the father says that his wife knows how to brew potions. If she had the mana to brew potions while they were on the run, they must have had enough money to live on. Aziel turns to her father and says that yesterday she wanted to ask him if she and Claire are twins. They celebrated their 9th birthday in February, so she wants to know very badly. Is the Duke their father? She smiles very sweetly, a ray of hope playing in her eyes. The father smiles back, and the girl doesn't need words. She realizes that he is their father and hugs him. Then the Duke calls Claire to hug them all together, and the 3 of them hug, and it looks very nice. The butler looks on, smiling and wondering if they will be laughed at for hugging like that. Meanwhile, while the girls were eating various delicacies on the balcony, Charlotte asked if he had really pardoned her in exchange for his name being removed from the list of founders of the empire. Claire eavesdrops on them quite closely. She doesn't tell Aziel that she hears something. Her father tells her that there is a list of the founders of the new empire, of those who helped bring the new emperor to power. Claire realizes he's talking about a coup, when people overthrow a tyrant and put a new ruler in his place. The girl realizes that until yesterday it had nothing to do with her, but now it's a defining part of her life. When the tyrant was overthrown and Mommy's cousin took the throne, it turned her life upside down. The previous emperor killed his sister, who was rightfully the empress, through evil demonic magic. He wanted to kill her son, the crown prince, as well. The prince was in danger, and he barely survived with the help of his loyal subjects. In the end, he became emperor. Charlotte wants the Duke to make it clear, not only has she been granted a pardon, and left with the title of Duchess to her cousin of the emperor, perhaps, and I'm sure there's a catch. The father says he woke up the Fermata and swore to her that she was his Tara. The girl who drank tea froze for a second. Has he awakened that very Fermata, father, with a calm face to ask, is there any other way to? His mother says he's crazy. How could he awaken such a horrible thing at this time? At this point, Aziel is enjoying a delicious meal, but Claire is still drying up their conversation just the same. She agrees with Mommy that Fermata is the phoenix taking vows from people. He uses the energy of sincere vows to create a new heart for himself. And when he comes to life, he serves the one who swears. He receives the power of the phoenix at his disposal. But if a man breaks his vow, the fiery wrath of the phoenix burns him and everything he owns to the ground. Claire remembers that once there was a king who broke his oath before the Fremata. Not only he himself, but the whole kingdom was burned. Aziel still can't even imagine what serious conversations their parents are having now. The priests were forced to put the Fermata into a slumber. They promised that it would never again be allowed to come into contact with humans, and the Fremata has never been heard of since then. The father excuses himself and says he wanted the whole world to know that she is his Tear. My mom says my dad's calm like it's no big deal, but he's really crazy if he doesn't see it as a big deal. He says the Fermata are only dangerous when you cheat them. Isn't that true? So they are perfectly safe. His oath is the unalterable truth. Therefore, he has nothing to fear. His mother says that's why she thinks he's crazy. He knows why no one believed she was his Tara. She and his father cast a spell on him. She's been practicing magic all her life and still doesn't know it was a spell. Dad says he can explain it all briefly. This spell is Austriel's bind to a container he doesn't like. Meanwhile, outside, Aziel offers Claire a taste of candy. She's already full, but everything looks so good. She wants Claire to eat something and tell her what it tastes like. At that moment in the building, the mother asks herself, what was the spell she applied? The father asks her not to be afraid. Father says this spell makes Austriel serve his emperor for life. Meanwhile, Claire does try the offered goodie and tells me that it tastes creamy with lemon sweet and with citrus sourness. Aziel says it sounds really good. A serious conversation continues in the house. Charlotte does not believe that such magic can exist and the royal family can wield it. Father tells her that some of the emperors were intimidated by the nobles of Austriola because they were so much more powerful than they were. But the mother asks her husband how come he didn't serve her father, but he says he swore allegiance to Evan and called him emperor before the spell. Charlotte says her father was killed a long time ago. She asks him to tell her if he's still under his spell, but her father replies that his emperor, Evan, so he'll serve him until he dies. But he's still happy. She doesn't understand what makes him so happy. If he has Austriola's power, but is still the emperor's loyal dog, but he says that if it weren't for her magic power and her spells, Evan would never agree to pardon her. So the reason the Emperor pardoned Mom is because that Mom is the target that chained Dad. The parents bonded through a spell that backfired. Mom's a wizard who reads spells and Dad's her target. Meanwhile, the girls finish their feast. Even Claire is a bit full. Unlike the pleasant taste of lemon cake, it is soporific luscious. Also, Claire noticed that the candy was losing its flavor for a while and didn't know about such sweets. Charlotte tells her father she loves him and he reciprocates, but she doesn't understand why his love makes her so unhappy. When she says she loves him, it means she loves him above all else. Even if she never sees him again, she wants him to be happy. You just don't want her to get in his way. Isn't she entitled to that? Dad asks. Since when did she start thinking about other people? He says he remembers her wedding day when she tried to kill herself and said that she accidentally lost her ability to magic and can no longer get it back. And that's not even all he told her for the 5th time that she was his Tara. But then she threatened that she would hang herself if he ever said that again. He's been married to her for 3 years and not one day has not passed without scandals. When he says he loves her, it means he loves all, even her selfishness and depression. He says that if Charlotte truly loves him, he asks her to treat him as he treats her, as he loves her with all her faults and arrogance. Claire realizes that her father wants them back to the life that is rightfully theirs. And her mother doesn't want to go back because she loves him. She doesn't want them to live in that snake's nest together. She doesn't understand what kind of love this is and how adults can allow themselves such a thing. Everyone stands on their own and refuses to give in. Can you really live like this? Charlotte asks where the girls are. Duke says they probably went for a walk and are probably in the garden. Father goes to the window and sees them having fun at that moment. Claire raises a magical wind, thus amusing Eziel. He sees this beautiful picture and smiles to himself, and his wife comes up behind him and tells her the sad news that they're going home to the country tomorrow. She'll move to a place where he'll never find her again. She's grateful for what he's done for her, but he should get his name back on the list of founders. Duke says Evan will make an exception for her. He asks her if it's really the best thing she can do for him. She says he'll like it. It's really the best thing she can do. What about the children growing up without a father? The Duke can't understand that. Worse, their mother is a big sinner. She may protect them physically, but she can't protect them from moral harm. To convince the world that she was his Tara, he swore a firmate oath. It's a very bitter irony. He could convince everyone, but not her. The woman clearly has no arguments to answer. Duke says she's had enough fighting and enough separation. Doesn't she want it to stop? She apologizes to him, but he says that sounds very arrogant and it's best not to do that. He knows she doesn't feel sorry for him at all. He says she probably thinks she's doing him a favor, so he might even accept her pity. She used to be with him out of pity. She says he has no right to say that. Doesn't he remember how hurt and ashamed she was? He, with eyes scary with cold anger, the man looms over her and says that if she were really ashamed, wouldn't she act like she does now? She claims she doesn't know how to live with him for so many years. He tells her to finally be there for her. She just wants to get away from the worst sin of her life, and don't let her cover for the girls. She wants to run away from the inconvenience of the truth, because she feels ashamed that she loves him, and she is afraid to think what her late father might think of her. She's embarrassed. She admits he knows everything. She asks if he understands her better than she understands herself. The Lord smiles and says that she and the girls should go to the capital and live with him, but she replies that this is not a good idea. They are the descendants of a tyrant, and naturally the emperor wants to keep them under control. The father says that when they arrive, he wants to put their children officially in the family lineage. He doesn't know whether to ask, but when he asked the emperor to pardon her to restore her to her title, he says there was no reason to strip her of her title. If she was demoted and became a commoner, their children would have no right to inherit his estate and title. He will do everything possible but to keep her and their daughters from all evil. If she doesn't believe him, he can swear to the Fermata for it. She says not to dare to think about it anymore, he asks, and with a plea in his voice for her to come back to him at last. She says she wants to take some time to think about it. The Duke replies that she can stay as long as she wants. But Charlotte puts him to the fact that if he wants to become a family with them, he must be more delicate if she ever hears that he tells the girls what they don't need to know. He will never see them again. The Duke is frightened, and this comes as a real blow to him. But he asks Charlotte to teach him because he's a complete ignoramus. He wants to know what their children like. Claire heard their conversation, the words beneath the passion and pain, so much pain in Dad's words. It would seem impossible he's trying to hide it, but his intentions are obvious. She thought to interrupt their conversation with the help of Eziel. But it seems unnecessary they stopped raging. Eziel asks Claire where Mommy and Daddy are. She points her finger out the window of the ducal court and says they're still talking. Eziel asks if Claire can hear them from here. In the room, the conversation continues, and Charlotte tells us that Eziel is a curious child. Quite ordinary. She loves a pretty dress, sweets, books, fairy tales, and other things she is not so hard to make happy. Well, Claire's a different matter. She loves books, but not any that give her knowledge. Her father asks her which field, to which her mother replies that it doesn't matter to her. The most important thing is that she's interested in anything she doesn't know about when they go for a walk. Eziel's all about flowers, and Claire's always interested in the sky and clouds. Claire thinks that back then she thought she was doing a good job of playing dumb in front of her mom. Eziel asks what her parents are talking about now. Claire says they're talking about how much they love them. Eziel says that she loves Claire very much too. She says very briefly and clearly that she thanks Eziel for what she said, but the girl takes her hand and says that you have to say back that you love her very much too. If she makes excuses, she will never say what is in her heart. Eziel says that she likes Claire very much, and she's so happy that she's her twin, so they're gonna be fine, and Claire's gonna be fine because she knows what she's like at heart. She asks that Claire promise her only one thing when she falls in love with someone, to remember that no one can know her better than herself. Let her promise her. What will she say in response to this man's words of love? Claire says with a face that hasn't changed during the conversation that he promises her. At the same moment, the parents show up and ask if the kids are having fun, and Eziel starts to tell about their outing. At this point, Claire thinks that the Duke would probably be a great father for Eziel. She watches them interact, and she realizes that they are right for each other. He listens intently to the girl who tells him everything that's going on in her life. Claire hopes he'll be a good father to her, too. They're walking together as a family, holding hands. The family looks really cute. Then the story continues in the palace after some time from the family connection. Now they get dresses, toys, children's books, shiny jewelry. They get gifts every day. It's already getting out of hand. The Duke has made the largest room in the estate, a playroom for the girls in this room, even gets uncomfortable with how big it is, and they are only 9 years old. What else can he give them? And what's even more amazing is that his generosity not only extends to gifts, but also to time spent playing with them all day long. Of course, he gave Mommy time to think, and Claire's sure the Duke has more important things to do than watch Eziel draw pictures all day this week. The Duke has shown them he's ready to take on the role of father, but she's not the one who would suddenly accept a man who just appeared in her life, unlike Eziel, who accepted him right away. Eziel calls the Duke Daddy with naive ease, but Claire can't do that yet. The Duke's been very patient with her. He hasn't been disappointed, even though she can't even muster up the courage to call him father. He didn't impose on her conversations, letting her gradually get used to him. Claire seems to think that being with Eziel and Claire makes the Duke very happy strangely, but he looks at her with love. As Eziel and Mommy looked at her like that, only their emerald eyes, it was unconditional love. She never thought she would see the light of that love in eyes as violet as hers. Father asks Claire if she needs anything. He pays attention equally to Eziel and her. She is a little embarrassed when the Duke speaks to her. When the Duke saw what book she was reading, he brought her more books. And when he saw that Eziel was excited about the new doll, he bought more dolls the next day. For their sake, he would do anything. They had only recently seen each other for the first time. But it was as if he wanted to make up for his absence from their lives and give them all that their souls crave. A message he conveyed to them through his work. Mom could not help but notice his efforts. A week later, she came and called her father for a cup of tea. She must have made up her mind. She says the Duke has become very good friends with the girls. Dad says he's learned better. but there's still a lot he'd like to know about them. His mother tells him not to be modest. He hasn't been away from them all week, and he's probably got a lot on his mind. He says that business can wait, and at the same time they ask her how she's doing here. She says that here her little girls are happier. They seem to blossom even more in their father's care. She's very happy that they've become friends. Also, looking at her husband, whom she loves very much, she realizes that she is ready to say it. She agrees to return with him to the capital, but only on one condition. She tells the Duke that she will only stay for 1 year. He doesn't understand why exactly 1 year. She replies that it will be enough to ask for forgiveness and apologize. She says that Arshil is not the only one she has wronged. When she meets all the people in turn, she will ask for their forgiveness. They don't have to forgive her. But she does repent for what she did to them. At the moment the woman sorrowed, her husband says he understands the desire to apologize. The only thing he doesn't understand is that from whom she expects an apology. She must remember a couple of names, the pontiff and his Cardinal Sinsky. The lady says she will just apologize and they will see if they will forgive her. Her husband says if they have any honor left, they wouldn't dare show it to her. But she's been so unscrupulous to some people. She says she'll spend this year meeting everyone she's hurt and apologizing. And if someone has already died, she will apologize to their family. She doesn't just want to stop feeling guilty, she is truly remorseful. The man offers to take him with her, but she is against it. She's done him a lot of harm too. She's just asking him to take care of the girls and teach them to be like their father and not their mother. And yet she thinks she has no right to return to the palace. Arshil has done so much to have her pardoned. He's just one of her victims. Well, if he wants her to come back with him, she agrees. She'll have to answer for her sins at some point. She will apologize to people, but if they don't do the same for her, he knows how selfish she is, and she will remain herself even if they don't like it, and she even knows they won't like it. That's her plan for next year. The man heard all this and was a little shocked. She's a real egoist. She'll ask people to forgive her sins and won't see if they reciprocate. She'll entrust the girls to his care for the whole year. The man said he understood her perfectly. Eziel is from the garden and asks Claire if there will be any punishment if they pluck some flowers, but Claire says she will take the blame if anything happens, so she is free to pluck them. Eziel asks her not to do that, but Claire replies that her sister always cries when someone scolds her and she doesn't. Eziel knows that Claire doesn't cry, but she also knows that she doesn't like being scolded either. Eziel, with a happy look on her face, says she knows how much Claire doesn't like her tears. But she also doesn't like it when fairies are scolded, especially when it's not her fault. She calls Claire to come with her. Events take us back to the conversation between the adults. Arshil says that he will send the Emperor a letter that Charlotte will be with him. He wanted to meet her in person before he officially pardons her. The woman says she hasn't seen him since she was a child. He must have treated her badly, to which Arshil replies that this is not true, because when he was on the run, he lived under the alias Sir Lorinal. But the woman immediately changes her face and tells Arshil to forget about her plan for a year. She could be thrown in prison for insulting royalty if she enters the capital. Eziel comes up to her parents and asks, she's surprised. Are they really going to the capital? And what will they do there? And what year were they talking about? She's not embarrassed that she overheard her parents talking. Claire picks up the dropped Eziel flower and thinks to herself that it looks like they will be living in the capital for 1 year. She hopes that this year will be peaceful and quiet for their family. She picks up the air rose and makes this wish: Jerry, the capital of the empire. Once Mom made up her mind, she quickly packed their things and they set off on their journey. She stowed the things dearest to their hearts and got rid of all the magic potions. She never once looked back at their old home. Mom gives Claire a potion and tells her to use it when she bathes. She knows how to do it, but Claire doesn't understand why she needs it if it's not time to dye her hair. But Mama replies that it's a new potion and it won't dye her hair. It will bring her hair back to its true color. She's a smart girl, and she understands why Mama is doing this. She's not only the Duke's daughter, but she's also Austrial. When they get back to the capital, everyone will know that her violet eyes and silver hair are a symbol of power, and she won't have to hide them anymore. Everyone will know at first sight that she's Austrial. Her appearance will tell the world that she's the future Duchess, but she doesn't understand if it will make any difference. Mom says, of course, because everyone will want to be friends with her. She means that those brief acquaintances she had with the neighborhood kids. But Claire realizes that she's never even met them. So what if they don't? They'll want to ally themselves with her for political purposes, to raise her status, whatever she wants to do. When they get to the capital, she'll have access to everything she's doing. When they get there, people who seek her friendship will know that she's a person to whom all roads are open and that she's the Duke's daughter. Mommy scratches her child's ear affectionately. Claire thinks she can't be friends with people who need to benefit from her, but Mom says she doesn't need to be friends with them. She asks herself if there will be any exceptions, but Mom says some will think they can repay her for what she can do for them. Mom says she knows how hard it is for Claire, and she knows what she needs to be happy. Their family is very big, and they have a lot of wealth and power, and they want more. So the friendships she'll make with people won't be friendships between individuals. It'll be friendships between families. In the capital, silver hair would be a sign of her high, strong lineage. Her hair was black while they were on the run. And Claire liked that she didn't stand out much from other people, but in the capital, it would be nice to impress people she'd probably never have black hair again. The maid meets Milady and is amazed at her change. Now that she has silver hair, she looks even more like his lord. Claire had to try very hard to wash off all the paint. Mommy and Eziel must be asleep by now. But then her father notices her. He sees his daughter and comes closer. His reaction is very similar to Osteriola's. But still, he is very caring, takes his daughter in his arms and says he will take her to her room and the maid can go. He carries her in his arms and gently strokes her ear. Claire seems to like it, but she doesn't express any emotion. Her father says he wishes he had been able to hold her in his arms when she was smaller. Claire hears her father's words and says that her mom was often sad about her. She probably wasn't a very good child and wouldn't like her father. But he laughingly says that if they had met sooner, she would have started calling him Daddy sooner. She tells him that her mom brewed a potion to wash the dye out of her hair. The girl says this in the arms of her loving father, snuggled against his shoulder. The father looks with loving eyes at his little girl and says this hair is as shiny and healthy as his, only better. Mommy said how she would be his heir. She said silver hair would make people like her. She was a little sad because she didn't really want to bring it up. Her father, seeing how upset the girl was, asks what she was thinking. She's a little embarrassed and says it's weird for Claire. But suddenly her father stops. He asks Claire if she doesn't want to be his heir. He's a little shocked, but he pulls himself together and looks at his daughter carefully. She says that it will be very difficult and that this status will mean that everything she knows about life will not help her. She is scared that she will have to learn everything all over again. She is not confident in her abilities and does not know if she could handle such a responsibility. She felt confused when her mom told her about the future, that she'd have to relearn how to live, but her dad says her baby girl will be fine. He scratches her hair nicely. She looks at him in surprise, and he says it doesn't matter what happens or what she does. He'll make sure everything ends well because he loves her so much, he'll hold his sweet daughter in his arms. And with a look that gives her confidence in the future, Claire realizes that these are the same words that Mommy said, but Daddy said it in a different tone. Daddy will do everything in his power as Duke to protect her so much he loves her. She asks her father what will happen if she makes a mistake, but her father says he knows Claire and understands that she would never make a mistake on purpose. She has a history of worrying so much that her mother was sad for her. Although it's not her fault, that's the first thing she told him when he regretted not meeting her sooner. Claire says it's true. She grew up worrying about not offending anyone. So if she ever makes a mistake, Dad's sure there's a good reason. And then 3 months after her 9th birthday, Daddy appeared to her and her sister as if he were the best present ever from the May Fairy. And gradually, he brought her into a dream world. She saw herself as a 6 or 7-year-old, and Mommy and Daddy were together, so she knew it was a dream. After much hesitation, she asked Daddy to hold her in his arms. Daddy willingly took her in his arms, then put her on his lap and began to brush her hair. She repeats the word Daddy, barely audible, wanting to stay in this moment, and then the father hears his daughter calling him in her sleep. She, half asleep, tells how he brushed her hair in a dream. Her father tells her to sleep a little more. The girl falls asleep. He also calls the maid for a comb, but then the mother enters the room. Who's not happy that the sun's up and Claire's still asleep? So why didn't father wake her up? Mom asks Dad if he asked the servant for a comb. Why didn't he wake her up to brush her hair? Dad says they still have plenty of time and she's tired. He doesn't want to wake her up. Mom wakes up her daughter, who is sleepy, rubbing her eyes. She opens her eyes and sees in front of her that she is not in her bedroom, and she wonders what she sees in front of her. It was the servants, Dad and Mom, who greeted her. Mom tells her to get up and get cleaned up soon. It will be breakfast soon. And then she sees her father being approached by a maid carrying a comb, she thinks to herself. Could it be that she was talking in her sleep in front of all these people, and what no one could have expected was that Claire was embarrassed? She couldn't think that anyone could hear it. She felt very uncomfortable at the thought. In the meantime, the Emperor is told the news that his friend is coming with the Duchess to him, so he releases his ambassador and smiling happily. He says he's looking forward to them because he hasn't seen his relative in a long time. He's intrigued. The journey to the capital would be very long. Usually it takes 6 months. In the father's carriage, their journey took only a week. The father, while brushing his daughter's hair, says that if he uses the magic gate, they can rest every day and reach the capital in a week. He tells Claire and Eziel to come to him later, and he will carefully see if they are allergic to the portal. Mom says that the gates are usually devices with teleportation magic. They have their own characteristics, so the decision to use this type of magic has been reconsidered. They concentrate a large charge of magic. Each person has their own magic stamina limit. If when using magic gates this limit is exceeded, it creates a huge imbalance. And hence the ill health says that the magic gate works by the sheer power of magic. Some people can't stand that much magic, and it can be very painful. Dad thinks Mom's description of the magic gate is very abstruse, but Mom thinks her girls know the basics of magic. After 3 days, they arrived in the city of Crystal, from where they had to go through a gateway. Luckily, she and Eziel passed through the magical portal without any problems. All the employees of the teleportation station came out to meet their father. It only confirmed his power to Claire. They set off for the capital in a carriage. Mother teaches Her Majesty the proper way to greet Her Majesty. Out its marching etiquette lessons. She asks Eziel what the next greeting sounds like for Her Majesty. But the girl says she has to follow Claire word for word, but then Claire, with a little angry look on her face, warns her little sister that she should only speak after her if she forgets everything, so she should learn these phrases very well. On this carriage, they will take them to the Emperor. Even Daddy did not suspect that as soon as they appear in the capital, they will be waiting for the ready Emperor. So naturally, Mommy urgently began to teach the girls manners at court. Claire had no problems, but Eziel often couldn't understand the basic principles of etiquette. Her father tried to reassure her mother not to be afraid. He takes her by the shoulders and says that if Evan wanted them to be formal, he wouldn't have called them out of the way. But her mother says she understands that. But still, she has a bad feeling that won't let her rest. She says he knows what she did to the Emperor when he pretended to be one of her knights. Claire wondered what her mother's life was like before she ran away from the palace. She would be very interested to hear the story, but unfortunately her parents never talked about it. Suddenly, in a moment, Eziel takes Claire by the hand, who was not expecting anything, and tells her mommy not to worry. Claire remembers everything, and she just repeats after Claire, and they go to the royal palace. Claire tells Eziel to repeat after her, but she has to learn the greeting without it at the moment when Claire is trying to teach her little sister the words to say when greeting the Emperor. And the parents hug a little and enjoy the noise their non-children are making. She told Eziel to look at the floor during the greeting, but the girl could not understand the reason why she should do it. Claire, in order not to explain to her the essence of etiquette when talking to the Emperor, simply said that if she looked at the ceiling, she would get a neck ache. The wife looks at her husband and tells him that she is perfectly fine and not to worry about her. She can get through this and thanks him for his support. Claire notices with her father that her mother has a wedding ring on her hand. The girl saw her father smiling, but in that smile, there was also a tinge of defeat, as if he reminded himself that he had finally brought her mother to the capital, to the lowest abyss. She couldn't pretend she hadn't noticed anything. They seemed to be in a paradise of the vanquished. Jerem's royal palace shone with splendor, but she couldn't bring herself to admire it. Mom's efforts to memorize the royal etiquette were useless. Instead of the throne room, the emperor met them in a relaxed atmosphere. He did not look like an emperor at all. It seemed as if he was from a rich family of a strong aristocratic family, but not a lord that holds in his hands half of the earth. The mother bowed to the emperor in an attempt to show her respect. Claire realizes that the emperor and her father are very close. Her manner is familiar to her, and his appearance is similar, as if she has seen it somewhere before. Mama greeted the emperor and he asks her, but in return, the emperor seems to laugh at her, saying that she forgot to mention her title in her address. He is like a little child who has fun with the whole family, Claire thought. The father says enough is enough for His Majesty, and he presents his daughters his eldest Claire, who looks like him, and the youngest Eziel, who is her twin, to the emperor. It's nice to meet the children. He turns his attention to Claire, who also sees that he is interested in her. She had no choice but to greet the honorable emperor and promise to serve him faithfully. She said she would like his blessing, as her mother had taught her. Claire is scared because the emperor hasn't officially forgiven her mother yet. She doesn't know why, but she is racked with fear. The emperor asks what Austriolem's powers are, and Claire replies that she can control the wind, and the emperor asks her to show her powers. He rises from his seat, smiles sweetly, and tells them to follow him. The father wanted to object to the emperor, but the man, still smiling, begs his forgiveness and orders his father to stand still. And that's when Mom's sin kicks in, which she put on their father, and 5 magic circles appear, chains that restrain the father without giving him even a chance to move. The emperor asks to speak to Claire alone, but Eziel is frightened and runs to her sister's aid. She doesn't want to give her older sister to the fearsome emperor, but she is restrained by the courtiers. She calls out to Claire and asks him not to take her away. Claire. She can't stand the way her family is treated, so she uses the power of the wind and throws a court servant across the hall. The emperor claps his hands and says that's exactly what he thought. The Austrial family here is bent on justice. It's amazing that she can control her powers without training, especially at such a young age. He is delighted with her abilities and is being chased by Eziel, who threatens the emperor and is already in tears, telling him not to do anything bad to Claire, especially since he has already seen her abilities and there is no point in taking her away. The emperor turns to Claire's family and says that Eziel reminds him of his childhood, and the girl is surprised. Then the emperor, smiling slyly, says that he was joking, and the girl should not believe strange faces, and the emperor and Claire find themselves alone. The emperor asks if she has seen his abilities. He says that this magic has been working for over 10 years now. Perhaps even 15. He is not a folk magician, but he can lift objects with the sweep of a finger. Of course, this is not what the mighty Austrial, who possesses times the power of magic. Claire asks His Majesty, how often does he use magic? But the Majesty asks. The emperor says that the girl is different from her sister because she lies without conscience. Meanwhile, they are walking down the corridor. Claire stares at the emperor's back and asks herself, if this is where to try her in the magical chains, can she dodge his magic? She thinks Mom and Dad thought this might happen. They reached the great hall where they were met by butlers who were guarding some young boy, probably a prince. The boy was incredibly cute. He shone like a little sunshine and looked like an innocent bunny compared to the emperor. Prince Charming sees Claire and asks her father what kind of girl she is. He assumes it's the Duke's daughter. Claire looks at the prince and realizes he reminds her of Eziel, but he's 7 or 8 years younger. The emperor asks Claire to say hello to the prince, and just as her mother taught her, she performs the signature greeting for the aristocracy, taking herself by the hem of her skirt and saying all the formalities from the title to the request for any favors. The prince is also pleased to meet the young lady and tries to introduce himself. He asks if this girl is his cousin, which means they're related. The girl realizes that she must be. He knows what happened between his father and her mother. It means that the emperor and her mom were close. It also means that the emperor is willing to pardon her mom. She's just thinking about them. She says she wouldn't dare call herself his cousin. She's honored to hear it. The little prince is very much interested in the girl. The prince wants to see the Duke of Arshel, but the emperor says it is impossible today. Claire realizes that, most likely, so that the prince doesn't see the Duke in chains, the prince hopes to see my lady again. To which Claire bows out and says she'll be looking forward to seeing them too. They go on with the emperor and he asks her if she knows his name, and she looks at him a little dumbfounded and says he's the Honorable Evan Arthur. And then they say 10 or 15 more words for the emperor's name. He raises his hand and says that's enough. He forgot that Austrials have a photographic memory. He doesn't understand how the girl could remember it all. The girl thinks to herself that she memorized all this because she read about the emperor in books and newspapers, the most prosperous period in the history of the empire associated with his name. They go into a dirtier part of the palace that could use some cleaning up. The emperor takes her to some door and tries to show her a trick from his not-so-strong magic, but the girl looks at him and is perplexed and silent. The emperor says that the Austrials have only one problem. It's that they need to be taught how to react to jokes. Next time, he'd ask her to at least react in some way. Like, say, the usual wow girl remembered his recommendation, and next time we'll say, just wow girl feels some strange magic. She realizes that something bad is waiting for her in this room. Which reminds her of the magic that restrained her father. She refuses to go. His Majesty passes and opens the large doors and enters a spacious hall. The girl is surprised there was no sorcerer here to cast a spell or magic rune, and inside there were no magical objects filled with power. The room was empty and deserted. She thought he was trying to cast a spell on her, but now she's not sure she's embarrassed because she may have insulted the emperor without reason. The emperor asks Claire to listen to his lovely story and says that by the time it's over, Claire will be in the center of this room. But she doubts the story will be that interesting and yet remains waiting at the front door. The emperor begins the story and says that long ago there lived a mighty magician whose abilities were so great that she was chosen to lead the magic tower at the age of 18. He asks Claire because he's sure she understands the meaning of what he just said. The girl realizes that as people age, they accumulate magic, but the emperor says she was a true genius. Her mentor realized that he had nothing more to teach his able pupil and gave her a wizard's cloak. This was a very wise old man who used to occupy a leading place among mages. Now he gave this place to his pupil. When she took on a task that no one else dared to do, she began creating magic potions, and soon everyone wanted to get their hands on them at that moment. Claire begins to suspect something. Her face changes expression. She takes a few steps forward. The emperor continues to narrate and says that this young wizard was lucky in everything except one thing. She had a father who was willing to do anything for power and wealth. Someone who could create magic potions had a very greedy father. The emperor doesn't know someone like that. If someone had such a talented daughter, most parents would go around admiring her abilities. He means, who wouldn't do that? But the father couldn't stand his daughter. He went crazy about what his daughter was being told by the whole town. In the end, he really went crazy. The girl starts walking into the hall and starts to feel those unpleasant feelings again. But she can't just stand there and listen to him talk. The emperor continues the story, and with a smile turning to the girl, says that the sorceress hated her father. Of course, no one in their right mind would do this. She hated her father so much that she asked to remove her name from the genealogical tree. She wanted to cut all ties with her father. Claire at that moment thinks to herself that the person who is willing to cut all ties with the people closest to her but not get into an argument is clearly the person she knows. The emperor goes on to say that the father agreed to remove his daughter from the family tree in return. He asked that she transfer her magic power to him. No one knows how much magic this wizard wanted. Claire can't breathe anymore. In this hall, the emperor asks how Claire thinks for someone who has never lacked magic, how much magic she thinks she has passed on to her father. While he looks slyly at the girl, she replies that if this is an opportunity to free herself from her shadow, she would go much further. The emperor says the name Charlotte she gave her father enough magic to kill his mother. Of course, Charlotte had no idea her father was plotting a coup. Besides, Charlotte had a pretty good relationship with her late aunt and missing cousin. She heard what her father had done. She rushed to the palace. It was a nasty argument. The emperor says to tell Claire to think about it. She may have been a genius, but she'd already passed on most of her magic to her father. It was her loss. Charlotte was imprisoned for about 3 or 4 years. He doesn't know exactly how long since he was on the run himself. Claire is getting worse and worse. The emperor starts to support her with his hand. Meanwhile, the girl asks what happened to her mom. The emperor tells her that Charlotte is a proud woman. She only told one person about her imprisonment. She didn't even tell Arshil, who pleaded on his knees asking what happened. But the emperor says it can easily be assumed that she was a slave, since endless amounts of magic continued to be learned from his uncle. He used Charlotte's magic to torture his enemies, and he enjoyed taking whatever he wanted, the emperor asks. Isn't it awful also? He asks the girl to hold on and he will finish soon. Claire feels bad enough already. She doesn't understand if she's Austrial, and she's in so much pain why the emperor is perfectly fine. Claire realizes that this pressure pain and discomfort can only be felt by Austrial. The emperor looks down at the girl and says she's catching on fast and asks her to look up. The girl sees a scary pictogram above her that emits purple shadows. It looms over the whole room. She knows on an instinctive level that this magic would make any Austrial kneel and cry or even bark like a dog, but she realizes with horror the place she's in and what might await her if this power is used against her. It was magic that bound the Austrial to the emperor. The emperor says that his uncle believed that the empire should have complete power and control over the Austrials. He was unhappy that the church was treating the Austrials as deities while they were servants of the emperor, and judging by this magical rune, he saw that many of their ancestors were in agreement with his uncle, so this is just a guess on his part. But Charlotte was a gifted sorceress. He's sure she had a hunch that this magical rune was connected to Austrial. His uncle was also skilled in magic, but compared to Charlotte, he was a mere novice, so how could he know what Charlotte couldn't understand? The emperor assumes he tortured Charlotte until she told him the truth. The emperor says that of all the Austrials, his uncle chose the Duke of Archil as his victim. He kept getting on his nerves. The Duke not only accused the emperor of his despotism, but also seemed to have hidden his missing nephew. At that moment, when Arshil entered this hall, Charlotte activated a magic rune, and Arshil realized what she was behind it. And then Arshil fell madly in love, and it was a toxic love, but there was one problem: that Charlotte's case was like black magic. Austrials are good at resisting curses. They can repel almost every curse sent in their direction. For an Austrial to be unable to resist a curse, it was necessary to use a large amount of magic this day. Charlotte completely lost her magic. She has used up all the mana she had, now unable to store it up in terror. Claire realizes that for an experienced mage, it is a real punishment to lose her power. The emperor continues and says that all of Charlotte's magic is contained in this magical rune. The girl remembers these symbols on a tattered copy of basic magic in her mother's bedroom. Was written that she was once the most talented sorceress in the empire, and now she's stripped of all her magic. Reading a book with the basics of magic from the beginning, she must have fallen into a deep despair. The emperor looks at the girl and says he's sure she can imagine what happened next. Arshil wanted to save Charlotte. While her father was no longer interested in his helpless daughter and forced into marriage with a victim of her magic, Claire tries to justify herself and say that mom was dad's Tara. The emperor agrees, but says that at the same time, everyone thought that Arshil was under Charlotte's spell. He continues to talk and tells that their marriage was disastrous. He was there disguised as one of Arshil's guards. The bride threw her wedding ring at her father, shouting that he should marry the groom himself. The girl falls down without strength. She can no longer bear the pressure that comes from the ceiling. She loses strength, and the emperor takes her on his back. The girl is already half-conscious and tells the emperor that His Majesty will not betray her father and cannot bind her to himself. The emperor asks how confidently she can say that, since it's the first time she's seen him. Did she trust him so easily? But the girl says that if the emperor wanted to betray her father instead of telling her the story, he would have charged a rune of magic and used it to bind Claire to him. After the story, the girl sits on her father's lap. He asks if her sweet Lady Claire is all right. She doesn't answer and asks her father how her mother is and what she's doing now. Daddy says they've exhausted themselves with tears and now they're asleep, but the girl asks why Daddy's here then. He should be with them. He tells the girl that he loves Charlotte and Eziel very much, but he's only one, and she's his precious favorite person too. He says he loves Claire very much. Daddy wants to ask Claire something. Did the Emperor take her to that hall and put a curse on her? But Claire waves it off and says he didn't. Dad raises his head and says he doesn't think he ever told the girls about his power. He has the power of possession. That is, he can put anything he wants into his void where he chooses to control it or get rid of it. When she first met Daddy, she tried to use her powers to push him away, but the wind disappeared. Her abilities were blocked. She also remembers the taste of dessert that appeared and then disappeared again. Father says the main point is that when he brings something into his void, it belongs to him forever. He leaves a brand on those things. The father takes the pillow and swallows it. Then she dreams the girl smells the heat and the smell of smoke. The pillow reappears, but at first glance it looks perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened to it. His branding allows him to track the item or destroy it. Dad says that when Claire disappeared from the Emporium, he wished he'd left a brand on the man. He didn't want to make the same mistake twice. He asks Claire if she's sure she's not cursed. He says if she is, but she won't tell him, he'll do everything in his power to get the Emperor killed. But Claire takes her father's hand and says she wasn't cursed. And it's true, her father says he believes her, but if the curse is removed, did the Emperor somehow try to impose his will on her? But the girl says she thinks the Emperor really treasures his friendship with her father. He also told a story she ultimately needed to hear, and her parents would have had a hard time having that conversation. Also, the girl holding her father's hand says that the Emperor is a good friend and asks him not to be too hard on him. Her father says he's sorry he can't promise her that. The girl asks to visit her mom, and Eziel is concerned about how they're doing. Claire comes into her mom and Eziel's room and notices that the latter is awake. Claire thinks to herself that the last time she saw Eziel so upset, there was a time when she was so angry I didn't talk to her for a week. The truth is, they are as different as day and night. She knows for a fact that humans will never truly understand other human beings. But if they speak the same language and live in the same culture, they should communicate with each other. She asks herself why she then ended up twinning someone she can't understand or even communicate with when she asked such questions to her mom. Then she said to think of it this way, that her sister probably doesn't understand her either, but she's doing her best to get along with her. Well, then Claire said her sister doesn't need to try to get along with her. Eziel didn't speak to her for a week. Then, on the 5th day, Claire started to worry, and when she tried to make conversation on the 6th day, it was the first time Eziel ignored her. It came as a shock to Claire. She was surprised. Noticing that she was in shock, she then promised that she would do everything in her power to get along with Eziel, and Eziel then forgave her and greeted her dear sister with Mila's smile as usual.